The most recognizable voice in American television belonged to a man who didn't learn to speak English until he was 7 years old. Before he ever stepped on a Hollywood soundstage, he held 2 world shooting records. Before he became the face of law enforcement on American television, his own studio tried to rig the Academy Awards against him. And before he became the man in the trench coat who terrified an entire generation, Hollywood wrote him off, not once, not twice, but 3 separate times. Each time they said Robert Stack was finished. Each time he proved them dead wrong. And by the end of his life, the producers of the show that made him immortal would declare him literally irreplaceable. But how did a boy raised in Rome and Paris, speaking only Italian and French, become the most serious man in American entertainment? What secret passion defined him decades before acting ever did? And what exactly did the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences do to him at the 1957 Oscars? These are the 10 most incredible moments in the remarkable life of Robert Stack. Number 1. The boy who spoke no English. Robert Stack was born Charles Langford Stack on January 13, 1919, in Los Angeles, California. His family was Hollywood royalty before Hollywood even existed. 5th-generation Californians. His father, James Langford Stack, was a millionaire advertising executive the Los Angeles Times described as a millionaire sportsman. His mother, Elizabeth Modini Wood, was a society leader so prominent that Luella Parsons herself called her one of our social leaders. But behind the wealth was fracture. His parents divorced when Robert was just 1 year old. At age 3, his mother packed him up and took him to Europe while she studied singing in Rome and Paris. His older brother James stayed behind in America with their father, and for the next 3 or 4 years, young Robert Stack spoke only Italian and French, not a word of English. When he finally returned to Los Angeles around age 7, he was essentially an immigrant in his own country. A boy from one of California's oldest families who had to learn English from scratch, while the other kids on his block had been speaking it since birth. Then tragedy struck. His parents briefly remarried in 1928, but that same year his father died. Robert was 9 years old. His mother, believing her son desperately needed male role models, deliberately cultivated friendships with the most famous men in America. Young Robert Stack played polo with Spencer Tracy and Daryl Zanuck. He shot skeet with Clark Gable, Gary Cooper, and Fred McMurray. Gable once put a bottle of 21-year-old scotch between them and treated the boy like an equal. But it was a woman who would change his life the most, and she entered the picture with a shotgun in her hands. Number 2, the deadliest shot in Hollywood. In 1933, a 14-year-old Robert Stack met Carol Lombard at Lake Tahoe. Lombard was waiting for her Nevada divorce from William Powell, and Stack taught her to shoot skeet. He fell hopelessly in love with her. His mother disapproved of Lombard's famously salty language. But that introduction at the shooting range pointed Stack toward the passion that would define him long before acting ever did. By age 16, Robert Stack was on the All-American Skeet Team. In 1935, he was runner-up in the National Skeet Shooting Championship. Then in 1936, at just 17 years old, he traveled to St. Louis and won the World 20-Gauge Championship with a score of 99 out of 100. He set a world long-run record of 364 straight targets. He was named to Jimmy Robinson's first 3 Sports Afield All-America teams, the only shooter in history named to all 3. This was not a hobby. This was world-class athletic dominance. In 1971, Robert Stack was inducted into the National Skeet Shooting Hall of Fame. His lifelong friend, publishing magnate Robert Peterson, would later say it best. Outside of the shooting community, it is a little-known fact that Bob was a shooting champion, held numerous world records, and was the national skeet shooting runner-up, far before his role as Eliot Ness. Shooting was his first and true passion in life. So how did a world champion marksman end up giving Hollywood's most famous kiss? Number 3, the kiss that stopped America. After a year at the University of Southern California, Stack visited Universal Studios with his singing teacher. Producer Joe Pasternak spotted the tall, handsome young man and asked if he wanted to be in pictures. The audition was a love scene with actress Helen Parrish. Stack got the part on the spot. Universal had been searching for a leading man to give 17-year-old singing sensation Deanna Durbin her first on-screen kiss. It was a national publicity event. The studio chose the 20-year-old Stack, and he was cast as the dashing Ted Drake in First Love, released in 1939. That single kiss made front-page news across America. Stack later recalled, "The kiss was a big event at the time. It made newspaper front pages. Overnight, he was a matinee idol." He followed First Love with The Mortal Storm in 1940 opposite James Stewart, playing a young man seduced into the Nazi party. The film was such a direct attack on Hitler that the Third Reich banned all MGM products from Germany. Then came the role that reunited him with his first love. In 1942, Ernst Lubitsch cast Stack as a Polish Air Force pilot in To Be or Not to Be, opposite Jack Benny and Carole Lombard. Lombard mentored him on set, edging him back into his key light and keeping the young actor relaxed. She believed in him when few others did. On January 16, 1942, Carole Lombard boarded TWA Flight 3 out of Las Vegas after a war bond rally. The plane hit Mount Potosi, Nevada at nearly 8,000 feet. There were no survivors. Lombard was 33 years old. Robert Stack was walking out of the Hollywood Palladium that night with his date. They had been dancing. He heard a newspaper boy on the street corner, shouting the headline from the Los Angeles Times. He stopped, he listened, and decades later, as an old man, he could still recall every detail. The sound of the boy's voice, the cold air, the way the words hit him. The woman he had loved since he was 14 years old was gone forever, but the world was at war, and a champion shooter had a duty that Hollywood could not match. Number 4. The soldier who came back to nothing. Robert Stack served more than 3 years as a United States Navy aerial gunnery officer and instructor during World War II. His championship marksmanship was put directly to military use, teaching young pilots how to shoot and survive. When the war ended, Stack came home to a Hollywood that had moved on without him. The matinee idol who had kissed Deanna Durbin and starred opposite Carole Lombard was now just another returning veteran, competing for roles against a new generation of leading men. The parts waiting for him were forgettable studio filler. Fighter Squadron, A Date with Judy, Miss Tatlock's Millions. Pictures that nobody would remember 6 months after release. Stack felt it. He had tasted real success, worked with Lubitsch, shared the screen with Jimmy Stewart, and now he was making pictures that went nowhere. Those years felt like treading water, watching his career slowly drown while the industry handed its best roles to younger men who had not sacrificed 3 years to the Navy. There were bright spots. John Wayne's Batjack Productions gave him a strong role in Bud Boticher's The Bullfighter and The Lady in 1951, shot on location in Mexico, a film Stack always spoke of with genuine pride. And in 1952, he made cinema history by starring in Buona Devil, the first three-dimensional feature film ever made. But a gimmick picture and one good Wayne production were not enough to reverse a decade of decline. By the mid-1950s, the man who had once made front-page news with a single kiss was struggling to get noticed at all. It would take a drunk, impotent oil heir to save his career. Number 5. The Oscar they tried to steal. In 1954, William Wellman's The High and the Mighty, produced by John Wayne, gave Stack a meaty role as a pilot who unravels under pressure on a crippled trans-Pacific flight. The film was a hit, and Stack signed a 7-year contract with 20th Century Fox. But the peak was Douglas Sirk's Written on the Wind in 1956 at Universal International. Stack played Kyle Hadley, an alcoholic, impotent oil heir who marries Lauren Bacall while his best friend, played by Rock Hudson, quietly falls in love with her. It is one of the great melodramas of the 1950s and Stack's most lacerating performance. The man who Hollywood considered wooden tore himself open on camera and bled. The Academy nominated him for Best Supporting Actor. His on-screen sister, Dorothy Malone, was nominated for Best Supporting Actress. At the 29th Academy Awards on March 27, 1957, Dorothy Malone won her Oscar. Robert Stack did not. The award went to Anthony Quinn for Lust for Life in what was announced as a surprise result. But Stack believed it was no surprise at all. In his 1980 autobiography Straight Shooting, Stack wrote that 20th Century Fox, the studio that had loaned him to Universal International, organized block voting against him to prevent one of their own contract players from winning an Academy Award while working at a rival studio. The grudge had consequences. According to Turner Classic Movies, Fox's displeasure cost Stack that chance to appear in the film version of Ernest Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises in 1957. His own studio had sabotaged him at the Oscars. It was a betrayal that burned for the rest of his life. But the man who lost the Oscar was about to win something far bigger and far more dangerous. Number 6. Call Eliot Ness. Desi Arnaz, co-owner of Desilu Productions, personally pursued Robert Stack to play federal agent Eliot Ness in a new television series. Stack refused. He thought television was career suicide for a film actor with an Oscar nomination. He thought the title was stupid. He worried about what the show could possibly do after Al Capone went to prison. His agent insisted. Stack finally agreed, partly, as he later admitted, just to prove my point that the show would fail. The two-part pilot aired on CBS's Westinghouse Desilu Playhouse on April 20 and 27, 1959, with Neville Brand as Capone. Over 36 million viewers tuned in, just a million shy of beating Gunsmoke, the #1 program on television. CBS passed on the series. ABC grabbed it, and The Untouchables premiered on October 15, 1959. The numbers were enormous. The series hit number 8 in the Nielsen ratings for the 1960 to 1961 season with a 27 household rating. Stack won the 1960 Primetime Emmy for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Drama Series. The phrase, "Call Eliot Ness," entered everyday American speech. Stack himself owned 25% of the show through his own Langford Productions. Behind the camera, Stack ran the set with an iron discipline that matched his character. In 4 years and 119 episodes, nobody ever saw him lose his temper. Not once. Then one day, actor Joseph Wiseman swung a real axe into a brewery barrel for a scene. The axe ricocheted off a metal pipe and cut through Stack's Achilles tendon. It was an injury that would have sent most actors home for weeks. Stack kept filming. The real Eliot Ness's widow, Elizabeth, wrote Stack a personal letter on May 10, 1960, thanking him for the good name you have brought to the Untouchables. He kept that letter for the rest of his life. But the most violent show on American television was about to start a war of its own, and this one had real gangsters. Number 7. The war nobody expected. Critics savaged The Untouchables from the start. Journalist John Crosby called it a national disgrace. Psychiatrist Frederick Wortham argued in a 1960 TV Guide essay that Americans had been conditioned to enjoy violence. The 1961 Congressional Television Violence Hearings, which lasted nearly a year, named The Untouchables as Exhibit A. But the bigger storm was ethnic. On March 9, 1961, Brooklyn waterfront boss Anthony Tough Tony Anastasio led a picket outside ABC's New York headquarters, urging a boycott of the show's lead sponsor, Liggett and Myers Tobacco. 4 days later, Liggett and Myers dropped its sponsorship. On March 17, Desi Arnaz was forced to sign a 3-point agreement. No more fictional hoodlums with Italian names. More emphasis on Italian-American lawmen. Public recognition of Italian-American contributions to American culture. Frank Sinatra himself moved his production offices off the Desilu lot in protest, and reportedly nearly came to blows with Arnaz. Members of Congress demanded the show be taken off the air. Stack stood firm. "How dare they tell us that's how to run our business?" he demanded. How would they have us tell the story of this violent era? And when someone accused him of actually believing he was Eliot Ness, Stack fired back with a line that became legendary. Somebody once said, "You really think you're Eliot Ness?" "No, I don't think I'm Ness, but I sure as hell know I'm not Al Capone." But the damage was done. The Untouchables dropped from number 8 to number 41 in the ratings during the 1961 to 1962 season, crushed by NBC's Sing Along with Mitch. ABC tried different time slots, but it was over. The show was canceled after season 4 in 1963, and just like that, Robert Stack was typecast. The network saw him as Eliot Ness and nothing else. He rotated the lead on NBC's The Name of the Game from 1968 to 1971, essentially playing Eliot Ness with a typewriter. He led two short-lived cop dramas, Most Wanted and Strikeforce, both obviously cut from the same cloth. By the late 1970s, Hollywood had written him off for the second time. And then the phone rang with the strangest offer of his career. Number 8. The funniest serious man in America. Steven Spielberg cast Stack as General Joseph Stilwell in his expensive 1979 comedy epic, 1941. John Belushi reportedly stood in awe of his childhood hero on set. Stack delivered a startlingly funny, deadpan performance that caught the attention of filmmakers David Zucker, Jim Abrahams, and Jerry Zucker. They saw the dailies and did something unprecedented. They wrote the role of Captain Rex Kramer in Airplane. Specifically for Robert Stack, he was their first choice and the casting linchpin of the entire film. The concept was simple: play it completely straight. Stack excelled at exactly this. "I was playing every captain on every airline," he later explained. "They all have a halo over their head, and they walk different. Their chest is out, and their spine is dead straight." The joke was that Robert Stack, the most serious man in Hollywood, was delivering absurd lines with the same granite intensity he had brought to Eliot Ness. Airplane was made for $3.5 million. It earned over $170 million worldwide. Stack never accepted satire of Ness himself. That was a line he refused to cross, but he was happy to spoof his own persona. He voiced Ultra Magnus in the Transformers animated movie in 1986, a piece of cult trivia his Eliot Ness audience never knew. He turned up in Beavis and Butthead Do America, Basketball, and Joe vs. the Volcano. At 60 years old, Robert Stack had reinvented himself as a comedy star. Hollywood had written him off twice, and twice he had come back. But even comedy could not define his final act. That would require a trench coat, a fog machine, and the darkest mysteries in America. Number 9. The Man in the Trench Coat. In January 1987, NBC aired the first of 7 Unsolved Mysteries specials. Raymond Burr hosted the pilot. Carl Malden hosted the next 2. Robert Stack hosted the final 4. When creators John Cosgrove and Terry Dunn Muir chose a permanent host for the weekly series, there was no debate. They chose Stack. On October 5, 1988, Unsolved Mysteries premiered as a weekly series on NBC. Stack stepped out of a fog-shrouded doorway wearing a trench coat, his gray hair swept back, his baritone voice cutting through the darkness. He joked about the coat. "I only wear the trench coat because I desperately want to be Robert Mitchum." It gives you a rather mysterious thing, I guess. The show was unlike anything on American television. Dramatic reenactments, archival photographs, and a toll-free hotline asking viewers to call in with tips. NBC News actually disowned it, requiring a disclaimer that Unsolved Mysteries was not a news broadcast. But the public did not care about network politics. They cared about the cases. And the man presenting them had spent his entire career perfecting the one quality the show demanded above all else: authority. When Robert looked into the camera and told you someone was missing, you believed it. And the cases got solved. According to the show's official website, of the more than 1,300 mysteries profiled, half of the fugitive cases were solved. More than 100 families were reunited with lost loved ones. And 7 individuals who had been wrongly convicted were exonerated and released from prison. The series ran 9 seasons on NBC, 2 on CBS, and a final run on Lifetime, spanning 1988 to 2002. It was nominated for the Primetime Emmy for Outstanding Informational Series 6 times. For an entire generation, Robert Stack's face was the face of mystery itself. Children were terrified to watch. Adults could not look away. But behind the granite stare and the fog machines was a man whose private life told a very different story. Number 10. The Final Mystery. On January 23, 1956, Robert Stack married actress and former Miss Montana, Rosemary Bowe, at Beverly Hills Lutheran Church. He had proposed just 15 days earlier, on January 8th, while filming Written on the Wind. They had a daughter, Elizabeth, born in 1957, and a son, Charles. That marriage lasted 47 years. Nearly half a century in an industry where marriages were measured in months. In October 1969, Rosemarie was nearly killed in a car wreck in Sacramento when a rental car suffered mechanical failure. A passenger in the car was killed. Rosemarie suffered serious internal injuries and required plastic surgery. When Stack heard the news on the set of The Name of the Game, he did not wait for a commercial flight. He chartered a private plane and flew to her side immediately. That was the kind of man he was when the cameras were off. In late 2002, at the age of 83, Robert Stack was diagnosed with prostate cancer. He underwent radiation treatment in October. His doctors warned that the post-radiation effects made bypass surgery for 2 blocked arteries too risky. The man who had survived a severed Achilles tendon, mob protests, congressional hearings, and 3 career deaths without flinching was facing the one fight he could not win. On May 14, 2003, at around 5 o'clock in the evening, Rosemarie found him slumped over at their Bel Air home. Robert Stack had died of heart failure. He was 84 years old. He was buried at Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery in Los Angeles. Rosemarie survived him by nearly 16 years, passing away on January 20, 2019. The marriage that began on the set of Written on the Wind outlasted everything Hollywood threw at them. When Netflix revived Unsolved Mysteries in 2020, creator Terry Dunn Muir publicly refused to recast the host. Her words were simple and final. We have also opted for a hostless format, because the late, legendary Robert Stack was a singular and irreplaceable presence. A silhouette of Stack appears in the new show's opening credits. The man they wrote off 3 times had become the one man who could never be replaced. So let us take one final look at the extraordinary life of Robert Stack. A boy who spoke only Italian and French until age 7. A world champion skeet shooter inducted into the National Skeet Shooting Hall of Fame before most people knew his name. The man who gave Deanna Durbin her first on-screen kiss. A Navy gunnery instructor who served 3 years in World War II. An Oscar nominee whose own studio sabotaged him at the Academy Awards. The definitive Eliot Ness, who won an Emmy, drew 36 million viewers and kept filming after an axe severed his Achilles tendon. The deadpan genius of Airplane, a film that turned $3.5 million into $170 million. The man in the trench coat who hosted Unsolved Mysteries for 14 seasons helped solve hundreds of cases, reunited more than 100 families, and freed 7 innocent people from prison. A husband of 47 years, a chief of the Blackfoot Confederacy, and a man whose word meant something. They said he was too foreign. He became the most American voice on television. They said he was too serious. He became one of the funniest men in Hollywood. They said he was finished. He came back 3 times and outlasted them all. If you grew up hearing that voice cut through the darkness on a Sunday night, you already know. There was only one Robert Stack, and there will never be another. If this story moved you, hit subscribe and join us as we uncover the incredible lives Hollywood tried to forget. Because the best stories are the ones they never wanted you to hear.